Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Finding some good ideas when you're improvising over an alto dominant can be quite difficult, and often you just end up running up and down the scale without playing anything that's really that interesting. In this video I'm going to show you 3 different pentatonic scales within the alto scale that you can use when you're improvising over an alto dominant, and that's a really easy way to get some interesting and quite strong melodic ideas into your playing. I really like using pentatonic scales in my playing, and it's a sound that I associate more with modern jazz, since pentatonic scales didn't really appear in jazz until the end of the hard bop era. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, about improvising over chord changes, checking out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. G7 altered is the same as A flat melodic minor. So that means that the notes that we have available here are A flat, B flat, B, D flat, E flat, F, G, and then the A flat on top on the octave here. And notice that I'm thinking of this from a G7 point of view, and that's why I'm calling it a B and not a C flat. Because if you're thinking of this as an A flat minor scale, then it would actually be a C flat. But since we're thinking G7, then the B is a little bit more close to home, because that's the third of the chord. So we only have one minor pentatonic scale within this scale, and that's the one from B flat. So we have B flat minor pentatonic, that's B flat, D flat, E flat, F, A flat, and B flat. And that's the one I'm using in this first example. And the way you could play that, so of course you will probably know this position already, so which is kind of like a second position B flat minor pentatonic. Another way of playing it that I use quite a lot, where I'm using 3 notes per string on some of the strings, is to play it with 3 notes on one string and then 1 note on the next string, and then continue that pattern. So that could be something like this. The reason for doing this is really just that in that way we can easier get to some of the larger intervals within the scale. And one of the things that I really like about the pentatonic scale is that if you use some of these larger intervals, then you get a really nice open sound. The first part of the line you could look at as being a D flat 6 or a B flat minor 7 arpeggio. So I'm starting on the D flat and then up to the F, and the A flat, B flat, D flat. So that's all pretty much sort of a D flat 6 arpeggio in this case. Then I'm skipping up to the F and then pulling off down to the E flat. And this idea of mixing, picking and legato is something that's actually quite important for me when I'm using these pentatonic scales, and I'm gonna come back to that a little bit later in this video. So I'm doing the pull off down to the D flat again, then up the D flat major triad, and then I'm using 2 times 3 notes per string idea. So first just 3 notes on one string, so, and then the next string starting on the E flat, and here I'm using a large interval, so I'm skipping up a 4th up to the A flat, and then down the scale from here, and then resolving that to C major on the G, and then just a short fragment where I'm going from D to E and B to A to sort of resolve to the 13 on the C major 7. This next lick is using a different pentatonic scale, which I find is really useful if you want to play over an alto dominant, and actually anything you want to use with melodic minor, but especially the alto dominant, because it's also closely related to the tritone substitution. I'm also going to go over a small exercise that's going to help you develop your ability to mix legato and picking, because I find that that's really essential and really useful if you want to play these 2 note per string patterns fast. In this example I'm using an A flat minor 6 pentatonic scale. So that's the same as an A flat minor pentatonic scale, except I've exchanged the flat 7 with a major 6. So that means that we have A flat, B, D flat, E flat, F, and then A flat again. And you can play that something like this. Another way of looking at these notes is to order them differently and then think of them as a D flat 7 with a 9 arpeggio. So then we have D flat, F, A flat, B, and then E flat. And in that way we actually have this sort of relationship to the G7 because it's related to a D flat 7, which is a tritone substitute of G7. And that's the kind of sound that I'm using in the lick as well. The first part of this lick is really just the D flat 7 arpeggio. So I'm just playing an ascending D flat 7 arpeggio from D flat. Once I'm on the octave here, I'm pulling off down to the 7th, skipping up to the 3rd, and then down to the root again, and then up to the 5th, down to the 3rd, up to the 7th, and then pulling off down to the 5th, and then up to the 9th, down to the root, again with a pull off, and then up to the 3rd, and then I'm resolving to the C major 7 by playing this small fragment of the C major scale, so ending on the 13 of the C major 7. This lick really illustrates a cornerstone in my technique, which is that I'm combining legato with picking really often. And I find that that's really useful both for solving difficult things from my right hand, because if I'm using legato, then I'm kind of buying my right hand some time to move from string to string, for instance. And it's also really a nice way of just giving some natural sounding accents to certain notes within a line. So it's also a good way of just getting some good phrasing across. Pentatonic scales are really great for practicing this because there are 2 notes per string, and they lend themselves really well to having these exercises where you play patterns, and some of the patterns are going to be easier to play if you use legato. So an example of this, if we take the A flat minor 6 pentatonic, would be to play it in groups of 3 notes. So if I do that descending, that could be something like this. The next lick is using a pentatonic scale that's maybe a little bit more exotic, but it's also really great for getting some of the core melodic minor sounds out. And in this lick I'm also really demonstrating how I use economy picking quite often. Besides that, it's also a really great showcase of how you can use an E7 sus4 arpeggio on a C major 7. Here I'm using the E flat major flat 6 pentatonic scale. So that's E flat, F, G, B flat, B, and then back to E flat. And this is a scale that has an augmented triad in there, so we have, and that's really a core part of the sound of melodic minor. If we think of melodic minor as being sort of the tonic minor sound, then a part of that is definitely that augmented triad and the minor major sound. So that's in there, and that's a really strong, really powerful sound to use. One way of constructing this scale that's really useful is now we're using it on a G7 altered, and G7 is of course related to C, and in this case to maybe C minor. So if you take a C minor pentatonic scale like this, and then you lower the root, so the C, down to a B, then you have this scale. And that's the E flat major flat 6 pentatonic scale. So the first part of this line is really just using that augmented triad. So, and I'm picking it using economy picking. So the first note is a downstroke, and then I'm following that up with 2 upstrokes. Then I'm doing the same thing on the next string, so the B flat and then E flat, G and E flat. And then same idea again from F, but then down, now going down to a B, and then up to E flat. Now it's more sort of straight, also picking, and that's really just that pattern down through the scale, resolving to the E on the C major 7, and then on the C major 7 I'm first playing this E7 sus4 arpeggio, so then going up to the G, and then down to the D again, up to E, and then ending on the 13 of the C major 7. This video touched on using different techniques, so mixing legato and picking, and also this last example with some economy picking. And if you want me to make more videos on this, you can of course let me know about that in the comments. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and it's the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. The videos that I publish here every week are on finding some solid methods and good strategies to really explore the interesting things about jazz guitar and improvising. If you like this video and you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. I'm very grateful for the support that I'm getting from my patrons, and it's because of that that I can keep on publishing videos every week. And if you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.